Hello and welcome. My name is Jave, and this is the Retrospective. In this episode, we will be taking a look at the Battletoads franchise. The Battletoads are originally an idea thought up by Tim and Chris Stamper. An artist and programmer duo, the Stamper brothers are the co-founders of Ashby Computers and Graphics. Also known as Ultimate Play the Game, these UK-based developers went forward to release a series of successful games in the early home computer era. Two of which, Jetpack and Saberwolf, went on to sell over 300,000 copies each in 1983 and 1984. In 1988, the label was used one final time on a retrospective compilation, and Ultimate evolved into Rare to develop titles for the NES. The Battletoads series stars three anthropomorphic toads named Rash, Zitz, and Pimple. The concept was designed to rival the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games. In the game's backstory, the trio were originally human computer technicians and roommates. They tested the original Battletoads game by playing the game as the Toads in a virtual reality simulator. They became suspicious of the chief programmer, their boss Silas Volkmeyer, and decided to investigate the office at night. Upon testing the game, they discovered it was a trap and were transported to another planet, transformed into the Battletoads. The Dark Queen tried to destroy them upon arrival, but with the help of their new friend and mentor, Professor T-Bird, they escaped and decided to never rest until the Dark Queen was defeated once and for all. Frontman and class clown of the group was Rash. Always showing off and cracking jokes, he's the smallest of the Battletoads and always has his trademark sunglasses and spiked knee pads. Rash has been a playable character in most of the Battletoad games to date. Next, the leader of the Battletoads is Zitz. A tactical master and economical fighter, Zitz sports black gauntlets with built-in communication hardware, spiked knee pads, and a black belt with the Toad's emblem. He is playable in most of the games as well, but in the original NES game has a tan palette swap to help differentiate between the two players. Finally, the muscle of the group, Pimple is by far the largest and strongest of the Toads. Sporting spiked knee pads and spiked arm braces, he prefers fighting to talking. Pimple has also appeared in every Battletoads game, but has been kidnapped and out of action more times than either of his partners. The first Battletoads game was renowned for its extreme difficulty and was one of the more graphically advanced games released on the NES for its time. In the series, you take control of one of the Toads and wade through scores of baddies in a beat-em-up side-scrolling fashion. During finishing attacks, the character's body parts morph into exaggerated comical weapons of destruction. However, the Toads weren't all just punching and kicking. They also had access to objects strewn about the stages to be used as weapons, and were able to drive and pilot certain vehicles. Some stages even had races to the death and obstacle courses, which would test your reflexes and memory. The first Battletoads game was released in June 1991 in North America and published by Trade West. The Battletoads and Professor T-Bird were escorting Princess Angelica to her home planet using their spacecraft, the Vulture. Pimple and Angelica decide to take a quick spin in Pimple's own ship. But in the midst of their outing, the Dark Queen attacks with her troops and captures them. Pimple manages to send out a distress signal alerting the remaining Toads and Professor that the Dark Queen's taking them to Ragnarok's world. The trio flies to Ragnarok's world, drops Rash and Zitz onto the planet's surface where the Princess and Pimple are imprisoned. In true beat-em-up fashion, you make your way through Ragnarok's world fighting enemies and bosses. Fighting regular enemies is fairly straightforward. Weaken them enough with normal attacks and deliver the killing blow by morphing your body into a deadly weapon. However, bosses are a bit more challenging. Many bosses have powerful attacks that can kill you in a single blow. You start the game with a paltry 3 lives in reserve and 3 continues to use as you see fit. If 3 lives isn't quite enough, the developers saw fit to include an extra lives code. While on the title or continue screen, hold down the A and B buttons and press start, and you will begin with the slightly more generous 5 lives instead. When you lose a life, depending on the level, you will either respawn and simply pick back up where you left off, or restart at the nearest checkpoint. If you burn through all of your lives, a continue may be used to start the current level over from the beginning. If all continues are used up, then it's game over for the Toads. Fortunately, for every 100,000 points, you'll earn an extra life. In addition to that, there are 1-ups scattered around certain levels to pick up, along with flies the Toads can snack on to replenish their health. All of those extra lives tend to be used up rather quickly. You'll find yourself fighting through canyons, racing at breakneck speeds, and even trying to disarm time bombs before they explode. But if that isn't enough, the game also has a 2-player co-op mode. Normally, 2-player co-op in a game tends to make the game far easier to complete, correct? Well, not so with Battletoads. In fact, the game ratchets up difficulty with the addition of a friend. Friendly fire is a new danger to watch out for, and if a player dies on a stage that has checkpoints, both players have to restart from the last checkpoint, regardless on how the other player was doing. In the North American version, unfortunately, there is even a game-breaking glitch on one of the later levels that prevent the second player from moving and immediately dying. There is a way around it, but it appears that the developers never got that far in co-op to discover that one. The original Battletoads also had its fair share of ports. It was ported by Mindscape to the Amiga in 1992, but with less than stellar results. Poor collision detection and terrible controls did not help its case. In 1993, Arc System Works brought the game to the Sega Genesis and Sega Game Gear. And in the same year, Rare ported it to the Nintendo Game Boy and retitled it Battletoads in Ragnarok's World. The Game Boy version has fewer levels in it and is only single player. And finally, it was ported to the Amiga CD32 in 1994 by Mindscape. The second Battletoads game released by Rare arrived on the Nintendo Game Boy in November 1991. Despite the game not only being self-titled like the original and having the exact same box art, it is actually a different game. The game is single player and lets you take control of Zitz trying to rescue Rash and Pimble. There are plenty of differences with level design, and you still retain the ability to morph your body into over-the-top finishing moves. Much like the NES version, this game holds true to the original, being notoriously difficult to beat. Fast reflexes, memorization of traps, and a little patience and luck are required to beat it legitimately. 1993 brought us Battletoads and Double Dragon: The Ultimate Team. A crossover of both the Double Dragon and Battletoads games, it was developed by Rare with the game's engine and design based upon the Battletoads series. It is the first game in the series to feature all 3 Toads as playable characters, alongside a character selection screen. You can also choose to play as the Double Dragon protagonists, Billy and Jimmy Lee. After being defeated once again by the Battletoads, the Dark Queen allies herself with the Shadow Warriors from the Double Dragon series in an effort to dominate the galaxy. Deciding to even the odds, the Battletoads ask Billy and Jimmy Lee for help. The brothers agree, and all 5 team up to stop this new threat. This third game in the series follows the footsteps of the previous games. Fight your way through stages and defeat bosses at the end to proceed to the next level. The Toads and Lee brothers will encounter many enemies hailing from both series of games. Like the first Battletoads game, 2-player co-op is possible and still difficult. a noticeably weaker player will hold a strong player back. Originally released in 1993 for the NES, the third game in the series also made its way onto the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy a bit later in the year. In that same year, Battletoads in Battle Maniacs was released for the Super Nintendo. With a considerably more cartoony style, it still follows the traditional Battletoads formula, complete with exaggerated over-the-top finishing moves. In this installment, the Toads must enter the virtual reality gamescape in order to save the CEO of the company's daughter and Zitz. Unlike previous games, the Toads in this game actually have different moves and finishers. Pimple is the larger powerhouse with more range and tends to use his fists more often. Rash, on the other hand, is smaller and nimbler, and his standard attacks and finishers are more kick-based. Whichever controller port you are using dictates which Toad you'll be playing as. As you would expect, this game does have a 2-player co-op option as well. Battle Maniacs has been ported at least once in its lifetime. In 1996, the game was released by Tectoy in Brazil. However, the game appears to be barely finished, with some stages missing music, minor glitches, and even invisible obstacles in the turbo tunnel. And we come to the last entry in the Battletoads series. There was an arcade game released in 1994. Also known as Super Battletoads, this one had a few differences from its predecessors. The one noticeable difference is that it is a 3-player game and all of the Toads can be played at once. The trio also had their own strengths and different attacks. Being an arcade release, and not a console one, the game was far more graphic and dark than its previous ones. Fountains of blood and decapitations are a common sight. Don't be surprised to see a few groin punches as well. Super Battletoads was more a scrolling fighting game than a platformer. Vehicle sections emphasized more on combat than avoiding obstacles, which was probably a good thing considering the arcade game could eat up a fair amount of your quarters. Developed by Rare and published by Electronic Arts, it is also the only Battletoads game not released for home systems, as well as the only one where the Dark Queen is not the final boss, although she makes a cameo. A new Battletoads game was actually planned for the Game Boy Advance while Rare was still owned by Nintendo. The unnamed game was only in development for 2 weeks and never made it past a prototype stage. At the same time, an Xbox game was being considered as well. Management issues and conflicting ideas from the original creators stopped the production of this game before it even really got off the ground. Battletoads also spawned a half-hour animated cartoon special in 1992. Attempting to capitalize on the popularity of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there was a pilot episode made, but never picked up as a full series. The show had a slightly different backstory than the original NES game. 3 junior high students are given the ability to morph into the Battletoads at will, and are charged with protecting Professor T-Bird and Princess Angelica from the Dark Queen. The cartoon served as more of a prequel to the video game franchise. As of 2002, Rare is owned by Microsoft and is now a first-party developer for them. Since then, they've released a few games for the Xbox, such as Grabbed by the Ghoulies, a beat-em-up style action game that takes place in a haunted house, Conker: Live and Reloaded, which was a remake of the Nintendo 64's Conker's Bad Fur Day, the Viva Pinata series on the Xbox 360 and Nintendo DS, and their most recent games, the Kinect Sports franchise. A new Battletoads game on the horizon doesn't seem too likely at this point in time. Rare still owns the trademarks of the characters they developed for the Nintendo consoles, but no real rumors of a potential game have surfaced. In 2012, lead designer of Double Dragon Neon was quoted as saying, "Maybe if everyone from the internet calls and bothers Microsoft and Rare enough, we could get the Battletoads into Double Dragon Neon as DLC." That may have been the closest chance that the Toads had to appear in a new game in quite some time. Who's to say whether or not a new Battletoads game would even come close to capturing the magic it started in the 1991 original? Perhaps it might choose to venture into the realm of 3D? Hopefully, someday we'll see a true remake and once again enjoy morphing our limbs into comical finishing moves. This has been the Retrospective. Thank you for watching.
Battletoads. I wanna hit you in the face with my big ass fist, cause we the Battletoads, bitch, and we don't take no shit. Enemies step up and they get knocked the fuck out. Knock the fuck out, so what the fuck's up now? Put your bird in the face, to use his mouth as a weapon, run a jet to the goal and keep them all guessing.
How did they do that?
Do what?
Get through that place with the snakes, I don't know, shit.
It's true that